Today we want to continue our discussion or analysis of Miro as a tool using the tool augmentation tool. Previous videos looked at how Miro impacts the space of the learning environment, whether that's in person or online. And then we also looked at how time is impacted by the tool. Again, both in person and online. So please check out those videos if you have questions about that. Today I want to look at structure. Structure is a little different from the other two in the sense that structures resist change. However, that doesn't mean they're unchangeable. And there are tools that change structure over time. They're rare, but they do exist. But more likely, the tool is likely to be shaped by the structure because it's going to run up against structural or systemic barriers that affect how you can use it. So let's look at how this impacts the four different areas: traditional, informal, conversational, and presentational. So in a traditional environment, i.e. a regular classroom environment, one of the things that Miro tends to break down is this idea that you do have a bounded classroom. It breaks down the walls between the asynchronous and synchronous aspects of the class because it's a persistent thing. Even though you create it in class, you can still access it outside of class. And so students can be working on it in class, between class, come back to it in class, and so on and so forth. It kind of breaks down the walls and creates a very much a blended learning environment, which may cause some issues, surprisingly enough, because even though that's a very nice, effective teaching environment, something we all kind of hope for, students are not used to it, simply put. And so they may resist this idea and they may have trouble wrapping their heads around that. Also, there may be structures around the school that make that difficult to do too, firewalls and things like that. So that's potential impact or interaction with the traditional structures. Informal structures, well, I mean, again, the in-person aspects of that, students working outside of class in an informal environment. If the environment doesn't support that kind of interaction, you may not have big screens, you may have limited Wi-Fi, things like that. It can tend to undermine the effectiveness of that informal exercise. Conversational environments, online. One thing that I've discovered doing this remotely through like Zoom and so on, it's great. It works really well, except that students do sometimes run up against some technical difficulties. I always have to tell them, try to use an actual PC rather than a mobile device. The app just works better. And it may be that Miro ultimately improves that, but at the moment that can be somewhat of an issue. Also, the hurdles of thinking about concept mapping as a thing, right? The other factor here is that students may not, in terms of working remotely, if you get to the presentational thing, students may not independently go and work on this on their own. Miro does not lend itself well to traditional graded assignments. It's really designed to be a sandbox, a play area for ideas. It's hard to grade that, assuming that you'd want to, and so that may may make students not really do things asynchronously with it, unless you give them a specific assignment that creates something. So putting all those things together, there's certainly constraints and opportunities like with any other technology. Miro is going to be limited by the environment in which it is operated. However, it has the potential of changing that environment over time. I mean, it may force more thinking about blended learning in terms of both on the part of the students, but also in terms of the school structure. Creates some real opportunities there. So in terms of remedies or dealing with things, again, lowering barriers to entry, that may involve giving technology to the students. Maybe ultimately Miro's tools will upgrade. Actually, I assume they will at some point, but that also would tend to make access a little bit better. It's already pretty good, but it's still, again, with the mobile app, it still leaves a little bit desired. Think about how you can explain it, how it works to audiences that don't necessarily get the thinking around that. So, look for legacy tech. One thing, again, it's very similar to what I do with Miro, is I've used whiteboards and Post-it notes and then have people draw lines between the Post-it notes, and then ultimately I capture that with a camera. It kind of does the same thing as Miro, but it's not anywhere near as good. And so that's, but if you have to explain that to somebody, that's something where everybody knows these days, at least I hope, has some idea of what a whiteboard is. So next time, we're going to smash all this back together and talk about synthesis and how we synthesize all of these things into one idea that kind of gives us a holistic picture of how Miro is affected by the learning environment.